My name is VICKIE de Beer, and I am a food writer and journalist with a very specific interest in diabetes, because my son Luca de Beer was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 10 years ago, and we have been living with this chronic disease obviously since then. For me, this time of Corona has just emphasized the importance of diseases like diabetes and specifically autoimmune diseases. I think we all have heard in the news and on social media about people with pre-existing conditions, or they speak about vulnerable people. And we are surrounded by these vulnerable people, and they were so severely affected by the coronavirus, often leading to deaths and really very harsh complications of this disease. So I wanted to touch on who are the vulnerable people? Who are the people that are suffering more because their immune systems are already compromised? If you look at people with autoimmune diseases, there are so many different autoimmune diseases at this stage, and these are compromised people. These are the vulnerable ones. And I think people don't realize how this is increasing yearly in the world. So certain autoimmune diseases like diabetes, like Crohn's disease, celiac disease, lupus, all these diseases, we don't even know why they are caused. Scientists don't know why they are caused. There's different reasons that they give. Even things like just a trauma in your life can cause an autoimmune response. So what it basically means is that your body starts attacking your own body. So normally your immune system can very easily distinguish between a foreign attack like a bacteria or a virus, and there would be an immune response to stop that infection from taking hold in your body. But sometimes the body reacts completely in the opposite way, and it starts attacking your own cells. So specifically with a disease like diabetes, what happens is that your body attacks the beta cells in your pancreas, and this basically destroys your ability to make insulin. So on the one hand, we have people with autoimmune diseases, and on the other hand, we have people with lifestyle diseases. So why we distinguish between the two is because an autoimmune disease probably, we do believe, starts with a genetic underlying sort of capability of getting that disease. On the other side, you get lifestyle diseases that we say are caused by your own life choices and decisions. Example, obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and cardiovascular disease. So many of these things are also genetic, but if you have a certain lifestyle of eating a lot of overprocessed foods, takeaway foods, unhealthy eating, too much, not having balance in your life, exercise, too much alcohol, and things like that, you tend to become obese and not being active. And that is why those types of diseases are called lifestyle diseases. So why I want to discuss these two very important elements is because diabetes actually is one of the few diseases that have both of these aspects. It is an autoimmune disease with type 1 diabetes, but it is also a lifestyle disease with type 2 diabetes. And shockingly, what we must realize is that diabetes is basically the world's 7th leading cause of death at this stage. There's over 463 million people in the world suffering from diabetes. And this is not even people suffering from pre-diabetes. In other words, they are still becoming diabetics, but already they are very sick and their immune systems are very compromised. So why is it important for a person in the food industry, whether you are a teacher, a student, a chef, or somebody that wants to become maybe a product developer, to know about these diseases and to understand why some people are more vulnerable? Because diet plays such a very important role in all of these diseases. So I would like to just backtrack a little bit before we carry on with diabetes and just talk about basic nutrition. So the basic macro nutrients that we speak of when we talk about nutrition is fat, carbohydrates, and protein. And this is what your body basically needs, apart from all the minerals and vitamins and fiber and all those things, to be healthy and be balanced. But I think things have changed so much over the years. So people often ask me, why is diabetes on the increase? Why do we see more autoimmune diseases? Why are so many people suffering from obesity and heart disease and cardiovascular disease? And the only answer that I can give is that our diet and our lifestyle has significantly changed over the last 60 to 70 years. In the past, food was not processed so much. From the 1950s onwards, foods became hyper processed and worked. And also, literally, the nutritional triangle changed. The American Agricultural Society brought out in the 1950s a new nutritional triangle that placed carbohydrates and grains and pulses and basically starches at the bottom of the triangle, the broadest part, saying that this is what your meal plan should be based on, so that you must have to eat so much of this. Then they placed fruits and vegetables, then they placed protein, and high up on the pinnacle of this pyramid, fats were placed. And this gives you a very good indication of what changed in the modern diet. So fats have been ostracized and has been made out to be the evil of all things dietary. And it was said that fat causes heart disease, it causes cholesterol. And so we have cut fats from our diets, and we have replaced it with a different variety of starches and thickeners and processed pulses and grains. And this has changed so significantly the way that we eat and also how we look, because all the carbohydrates that we are eating, this huge amount of carbohydrates that we base our diets on now, has been causing us to just gain weight and getting diseases like diabetes, fatty liver, heart disease, and so forth. The lack of fat has also contributed to our health issues, because we suddenly said you can't have any fat anymore. And what people and producers have done with overproduced foods was that, because things like, had to be thickened and you have to have flavor carriers, because fat is a flavor carrier. If you take fat out of food, it tastes like nothing. So they added thickeners and starches and things like, and sugar to food. So when we eat processed foods and over-processed foods, hyper-processed foods, we get a lot of hidden starches and hidden sugars in our diet. That's apart from the huge amounts of starch that we anyway get into our diet by eating things like rice, potatoes, cereals, biscuits, bread, and things like that. So the whole balance of the modern diet has changed. So not only are food over-processed, we are eating a lot more carbohydrates than we should. We have hidden sugars and hidden starches. We have also become very lazy to cook. So we don't cook from scratch anymore. We buy pre-prepared foods. We buy a lot of takeaways. And all of these foods are basically filled with hidden starches and sugars and just preservatives and unnatural things. So no wonder that people have become so sick. And I think the most important thing for me, why diet is so important to me, is because with something like diabetes that we now know is one of the leading causes of death in the world, and that we really know it is on the increase yearly, is one of the autoimmune diseases that really, really can be changed through diet. So we did say that type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease, which means it cannot be reversed. There's nothing that can reverse it. And a person with type 1 diabetes will always have to take insulin to survive. It is it is absolutely important to get insulin for body processes. You cannot live without it. But the danger with type 1 diabetics are that often medical people now tell you that you can eat whatever you want, just as long as you inject enough insulin. Now, the bad thing about that is that in the long run, if you eat a lot of carbohydrates, this carbohydrate is changed into glucose in your blood, and this leads to a higher need for insulin. Because just to backtrack quickly so that you understand what insulin actually does in your body. So you have energy that you take in through food. That energy is changed into glucose in your blood, and it's the glucose is your energy needs to take into your cells and to your muscles, and insulin is literally the taxi that transports the glucose to the cells to be converted into energy and used. If you eat so much glucose all the time, in other words, you eat a lot of starches, white rice, bread, pasta, biscuits, cookies, you drink Coca-Cola, you drink flavored waters, you have a huge amount of glucose in your blood system. And your body cannot physically excrete enough insulin to move all of that energy, all of the glucose to the cells. You cannot absorb it all. You cannot use it all. So it is stored in your liver. And that causes, in the long run, it can cause things like fatty liver. Or the high glucose in your veins just damage your veins. It's literally like scouring the sides of your veins. And it causes buildup in your veins that later can loosen and cause things like strokes and heart attacks. So huge quantities of glucose in your blood is very bad for you, and it leads to the increased excretion of insulin, and that leads to what we call insulemia. So long before you become insulin resistant or type 2 diabetic, you have raised insulin in your blood. Your body is trying to get rid of all this glucose in your blood that is so damaging for you. Then, after a while, because of these huge quantities of insulin in your blood, you start to be resistant to the insulin. Your body cannot absorb that insulin anymore. And so you can still not take the glucose away. And then you start getting raised blood sugars. And that is the start of pre-diabetes. And then in the long run, if you cannot use the insulin anymore, you are a type 2 diabetic, and you need to start injecting the insulin that your body needs because you cannot use your own insulin. So that's type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes, with the autoimmune disease, your body starts attacking your own cells, in your beta cells in your pancreas, until it is completely destroyed. You cannot make insulin anymore. You're incapable of making insulin. So every day you need to inject insulin into your body, a long-working insulin, and then when you eat, you have to inject short-working insulin to cover the food that you're eating. So if you are going to eat a meal high in carbohydrates, in other words, white starches, rice, potatoes, pasta, sorry that I keep repeating that, but people do not always realize what they are putting in their bodies. All of those things are turned instantly into glucose in your blood system. So for your body to remove such a huge amount of glucose, you will need a very big amount of insulin. So you must inject a lot of insulin. Now we know what happens to your body. If you use a lot of insulin all of the time, you become insulin resistant. So type 1 diabetics, although they are not type 2 diabetics, the danger is that in the long run of eating a high glucose diet and injecting huge amounts of insulin for your whole life, that you can become a type 2 diabetic as well. In other words, a type 1 diabetic that is actually resistant to insulin, which is an extremely dangerous position to be in. So for type 1 diabetics, as with type 2 diabetics, having a low carbohydrate diet is such an important way in managing the diet and managing your health for the rest of your life and the quality of life. Because type 1 diabetics, because they have fluctuating blood sugars, because insulin can only control so much if you inject it. It's not regulated constantly like when your pancreas does it, it's a hormone that's constantly adapted in your body. You're constantly controlling, giving more and to control blood sugar. So now suddenly you are only injecting 5 times a day. Obviously, the control is not as good as when you are not diabetic. So in the long run, type 1 diabetics, as with type 2 diabetics, become sick with diseases like fatty liver. They can have heart disease, they can have cardiovascular disease because of the high glucose. So what we aim to do is to stop the fluctuation of the blood sugars, to keep the blood sugars as stable as possible while injecting insulin. The only way that you can do that for a type 1 diabetic and for a type 2 diabetic is with a low carbohydrate diet. So what exactly does a low carbohydrate diet entail? It is not just about removing all the white starches and processed baked goods, breads, cookies, biscuits, and pastas. It's also about replacing those starches with other good, fibrous, healthy carbohydrates, very low carbohydrates. So we replace all the white starches with vegetables, with low carbohydrate, non-starchy vegetables, like broccoli, cauliflower, pumpkin, spinach, green beans, tomatoes. All these things are low in carbohydrates, high in fiber, and nutritionally very dense, and also high in flavor. And these things become our new staples. So instead of eating rice, we will eat cauliflower rice. Instead of eating pasta, we make noodles out of baby marrows and zucchinis. Instead of eating potato mash, we will mash and make with pumpkin or even cauliflower. So this is a very important part of eating healthily. And then also we add the good fats back into the diet because we need fats. We need unsaturated fats and saturated fats for our body processes. And because fat was so vilified for so many years, people are so afraid of cooking with fat, but you desperately need these fats because fat is a good form of energy. For so many years, we have been told that sugar is energy. I mean, it was one of the biggest advertisement campaigns of our times, sugar for energy. And it's the biggest lie, I think, about food that is out there and that is actually still making people sick. People think they are doing a good thing, eat sugary foods to up their energy levels. And it has exactly the opposite effect. If you eat a lot of sugar, your blood sugar will spike very high, unnaturally high. Your body has to work so hard to get rid of that glucose. So you need a lot of insulin to get it out. And that leads to a plummeting blood sugar again. So after every high, you will have a low. And many people that still eat a high carbohydrate diet complain about feeling very tired during the day and having these moments of complete fatigue where they start craving carbohydrates. And it's because your body uses the glucose as those instant energy spikes, followed by the extreme lows because of the huge amount of insulin that you need to secrete. And now your body craves that sugar kick again. So it is an up and down cycle that is so dangerous in the long run, but also makes you tired and lethargic in the short run. And also, it influences your brain. A high sugar glucose diet makes your brain very foggy and very lethargic. And people actually talk about the brain fog. Your concentration levels are low. That is why people often say with children that breakfast is so important because they become tired in school if they don't have a proper breakfast. But then parents give them cereal and porridge and very high glucose starches for breakfast so that they peak probably around 10 o'clock in the morning, and then they have a plummeting low from 10 o'clock until 12, and concentration levels go down. They feel tired, they can't concentrate, and so forth. So it's this bad cycle that we are living in, and that's actually harming us in the long run. and influencing our quality of life and energy levels in the short run. So when you start getting your energy from fats, your body, what we call is becomes keto adapted. It starts to learn not to crave the glucose, but to start feeding on fat. So the one thing that firstly happens is that you lose weight because you actually use the fat in your body for energy. You don't just store it like you did in the past. But also fat releases very slowly. And fat is a good form of energy, so you don't feel tired afterwards. There's no peaks in the blood sugar, and you basically don't get the drops afterwards. So it's a sustainable energy. So why is it important for a chef or a chef student or anybody in the food industry to realize this? Because we have all fallen into this trap of serving carbohydrates with every meal that we sell. Everything that we make, we put carbohydrates next to it. I'm talking about the white starchy carbohydrates. And I think that is what I would like you to realize, is that there's more out there, that you can make a difference for people that is vulnerable in their health, but also for stopping this unhealthy cycle of being addicted to glucose, and change people by offering them other vegetables and other low carbohydrate vegetables as sides and as on your menus. Just thinking about that before you plan a menu. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.